Hi everyone, and welcome to the Design VC, the show where design meets business and creativity meets capital. And I'm your host, Andy Budd. Each week I'll be talking to founders, investors and designers about the role design has played in the world of startups. And today I'm really excited to be joined by the wonderful Kate Aronowitz. Kate's currently working at Google Ventures. Before that, she's had an amazing stint as a designer and design leader in some really outstanding companies, eBay, LinkedIn, Facebook, to name just a few. So Kate, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's really exciting to have you join. I've been a huge fan of what you've been doing for ages, and so I'm really grateful that you'd spend time with me today. So I want to start with where you're at the moment. So you're currently a portfolio operations leader at GV, Google Ventures, in the Bay Area. I think most people will have heard of GV, but they might not know the kind of intricacies of the companies you invest in and the stages you invest. Can you just give a little high level, I guess, investment thesis around Google Ventures?
Yeah, happy to. So Google Ventures, as you can imagine, we are a part of Google, but we're kind of not a part of Google, which is kind of interesting. So we have one LP, which means we get all of our money from one source, and that is Google. But what's amazing about Google is that they trust us to invest the money. They don't get data from our startups. They don't look into our startups. There's very much a wall between who and what we invest in and Google. And we are their early stage investment arm. So Google actually has a few investment firms underneath it. We're early stage. And we're a bit sector agnostic, which is really cool. Almost half of our money actually goes into life sciences. I report into somebody who's actually an MD who does biotech and health tech. We also have a really robust enterprise investment arm, and then some consumer. As you can imagine, AI is eating into everything. We've been around for about 15 years, and invest a little bit more than about $1 billion a year, which is kind of crazy. But what's really cool is not only do we have one LP, which means we don't spend a lot of our time trying to raise money. Google is very patient capital. We get to work with founders and tell them, like, look, we don't expect you to return the money immediately. We want to be there with you for the long haul. We believe in your big idea. Google believes in moonshots. We believe in moonshots too, and we believe in founders with really big ideas. So that's what kind of makes Google Ventures special in terms of just GV and what we invest in. And then as far as my role goes, there's the investing side, and then we call it the platform or the ops team. And we've been there since the very beginning. One of the founding theses behind GV was that founders often need help with really critical functions. And so they built it in from the very beginning. And what's crazy is the first partner on the GV team, the ops team, was actually designer. So design has been in GV's blood since the very beginning. And so I spend my time with founders helping them with design problems.
Amazing. I mean, you've touched on a whole bunch of topics I want to dive into in a little bit more detail in a second, but I'm kind of curious, like a lot of VC funds work in terms of vintages. They'll have fund 1, fund 2, fund 3, fund 4. Is that how you work as well, or is it just kind of a rolling deployment of capital?
No, we do work in vintages, and they're 2-year, typically 2-year, which is nice as well.
Gotcha. So you must be on fund 7, 8 or 9 or something at the moment, I guess.
Longer than that. Yeah, we actually started with 1-year funds for a while, and I think we switched to 2-year in probably like 2019.
And because you mentioned like the focus is on patient capital, does that sort of skew your investments towards more deep tech? Because obviously, like, there are kinds of products that kind of take sort of 5 or 10 years to kind of come to market and scale. And then there are ones that take 20 or 30 years. I remember sitting down with a founder who was creating a new salt-based nuclear reactor. And I was chatting to him and he's like, well, we think we're going to have a lab demo working in like 8 years' time. I was like, I just don't know how to manage that. Working a fund where we have a 10-year kind of desire to get our returns back. Not even having a working demo for 8 years seems like, a crazy thing. But is that where you're focusing on, these sort of big, long?
Yeah, I think it shows up in a couple of ways. I think one, some of the investments we invest in, we invest in drug development. Drugs take 10 years to bring to markets. Just that in of itself, you have to be patient and you have to believe in the science and understand that process, which we deeply do. But then I think it's also just across the kind of founders that we look for. We don't want somebody that's just going to solve the problem that's immediately in front of them. I love to ask them, like, what happens in 5 years if everything goes right? I don't want you to just think about the problem you're solving next quarter. What happens if this really takes off? We are looking for founders that have really big, world-changing ideas, and we're okay going along the ride. We're okay seeing pivots. In fact, we encourage it. If something's not working out, let's pivot. We'll be there for you, and let's get on to the next thing to solve.
So does that mean, are there particular things you have, like almost like an anti-portfolio, an anti-thesis? So there's certain sectors that you don't generally invest in. Are you sort of avoiding the current craze for sort of, AI wrapper kind of co-pilots, for instance? Or is there anything else that you don't really sort of focus
Good question. I don't know that we have an anti-portfolio. I think, it's interesting to see how the fund has evolved over the past, we're 16 years in. It was very much a seed investment at the beginning, and no one knew who Google Ventures was, even though we had the Google name behind us. And it was just, to do seed investing, you just have to do a lot of investing. And over the years, the investors that we've hired each kind of have a specialty and a thesis, and we really trust them to go after that. So whether it's fintech or security, health tech, insurance, those types of things, we really trust the investors to go deep on their theses.
So I'm curious, you said that you're kind of portfolio operations lead, and you talked a little bit about how a big part of what you do, I guess, is to support founders once you've invested in them. Do you have any involvement in the investment decision at all, or do you come on board once the investment decision is made and your job is to kind of help them kind of scale and grow and be successful?
We do, actually. One of the reasons, so we can get at some point about why I joined GV. One of the key reasons I joined GV, I wasn't actually looking to get into venture capital, but the operating partners really do. We talk about seat at the table. We have a seat at the table. We are in all the pitches. We are there start to finish. Many times the investors will ask us to come in and help evaluate a company, whether it's like if the company is very user experience centric, where that's their edge, I go in and I take a look at the product and I get deep with the design team. If it's very talent reliant or we want to know more about the leadership team, we'll send our executive talent partner in. So we are very much involved from the very beginning to the very end. We have partner meetings on Monday. We are all at the table. My team has its own section of the agenda, and we work very, very close hand in hand with the investors. We have carry in the fund. We are very much a part of the firm, which obviously just makes it a much more rewarding experience. It also just makes for better work. When I can meet a founder at a pitch, I was in a pitch yesterday. They asked me to come in. They're like, it's very UX heavy. Come in and kind of grill the founder and see like how big they're thinking, how much they truly understand the problem they're trying to solve, and then kind of test their design chops a little bit. What are they curious about, and how could you help them?
I mean, that's all very familiar, very much the same as what I do at kind of C Camp. So I'm a venture partner at C Camp. But I am sort of involved in most of my work is kind of 70% is kind of post investment, but I'm involved in a lot of the pitches, a lot of the presentations, and like I'll be sort of invited in to speak to founders to kind of give my assessment on where the product is and where they're heading, whether it all kind of makes sense a lot. And so I love that balance. I love the balance of being able to see founders from the very first time they interact with us all the way through, hopefully, for them being successful and graduating, and you get a lot more kind of context through that. So I think we probably sort of do really similar things. Like as a portfolio operations lead, do you manage a team? Have you got a whole bunch of people working for you, or how does that all sort of fit together?
I do. So as I said, the investors make the investments, and then I've got a small team, and intentionally small, even though we have more than 400 companies in our portfolio. Now, some of them go back many years and are small investments. We're an intentionally small team that just focus on a few key areas. So design being one of them, and executive talent being another. I mean, I love to think that I can affect a company with my design chops, but getting the right talent on the team, like early and quick, I mean, I just think that there's no better impact you can have. So we have an executive talent team that's really killer. And we also have marketing and comms help. And then another awesome benefit we have is that while Google can't see into what we're doing, we have a lot of people at Google that pick up the phone for our startups. And so if they're interested in building on cloud, or they need help with their ad strategy, or they're trying to get to the Android store and understand that better. We have an awesome group of folks over at Google who get really energized by working with our startups. It's kind of a two-way street. They get to help, and then they also get informed and, inspired by what our startups are doing as well.
And sort of how big is the sort of operations team? Are there more operators than there are investors, or is it sort of evenly balanced?
We're less than 10 people. We're less than 10 people. We're small, whereas like other firms have, 10 people just doing marketing.
I think this is the thing that really surprised me when I got into VC. Like, you imagine that these firms, because they've got huge amounts of money, are really, really big beasts, and a lot of them are actually sort of small little kind of, sort of not lifestyle businesses, but they're kind of micro businesses. They're 30, 40, people. In fact, a lot of, I made a lot of VC funds that are just two people, two general partners in a room, in a kind of, in a Soho loft or whatever. Often the size of the fund is no indication of the size of the team.
No, like I think of ourselves as almost being like this small boutique agency. We don't do a lot of the one-to-many things. We don't have a giant Slack channel for all of our founders. We don't do newsletters. We don't do lots of one-to-many things. What we try to do is have my team focus on a few founders, a few companies at a time that are real rising stars, where we think we can have really dramatic impact at like certain inflection points. And also we just know that other VCs are offering a lot of that other stuff. Like, I could start a Slack channel, I could start a community group, but you know what, they're probably getting it better somewhere else, and I don't have the time to manage it. So we just try to focus on where we think we can really add value.
Yeah. I'm going to be talking to Jake Knapp and John Zaraski sort of soon, who are obviously GV alumni, and they were very involved in the sort of the early shaping of design sprints. Is that a practice that you folks still do, or is that kind of fallen by the wayside?
Yes and no. And I have tons of respect and credit for what they did. I mean, they're a huge reason why I joined GV. I had such excitement around the sprint book. I wrote to Jake very early, and I'm like, I heard you're writing a book. I need to see it. He printed out a galley copy. I was working at Wealthfront. We took it. We read it and used it. I would say that we still use sprint methodology in pieces. Sprint formally, is a 5-day process and takes a few people from GV to run an entire 5-day process. It takes us offline for a week. It takes a lot of investment from the founders. But if you think about it, a sprint is really just problem identification and articulation, same for an audience, testing and designing and iterating quite a bit, and then doing user testing on the other side to get real feedback to figure out what to build. We do all of those things. We just rarely string it together anymore in a 5-day sprint. We joke sometimes, I really like doing Mondays at sprints. Like, I love the big questions and trying to get everybody on the same page. Whereas Vanessa, who used to work closely with me, she loved the Wednesday, Thursday. Let's get in the like pixel pushing and the details and stuff like that. So a lot of times we'll say, okay, this firm just needs a Monday. We just need an alignment workshop. We need everybody to come together. Versus, look, the design team is at a place where they got 17 ideas. They don't know what to do. We need to do some user testing, and then we'll do that. So I would say that a lot of our work is very inspired, but has evolved in the same way.
It makes sense, and I think it's quite a challenging thing to scale. I think in the early days of GV, when you had a small number of portfolio companies, it's probably easy to deploy with the sheer volume of what's going on at the moment. And also, like you say, I think 10 or 15 years ago, maybe the knowledge was less available, whereas now I think there's so many more people doing this kind of stuff. There's so many more funds offering value add that maybe it's less of a there's less of a pull for you to do that now than there might have been 10 years ago. So you mentioned it already, but like, you were a former designer. I was a former designer. I'm curious, like, how you found your way in a little bit more detail, both into venture and into GV particularly.
Into venture and into GV. So it probably,
you can go back as far as near as you want. Oh,
that's okay. I think it actually goes to, I'm going to call it Facebook. When I was there, it was Facebook. Now Meta. And while I was there, when I joined the design team, I mean, now it's probably in the thousands. It was just a few designers basically sitting in a hallway near Mark. And when I interviewed with Mark, it was like, I want you to build me the biggest, best UX product design, whatever we were calling it at the time, product design team in the world, and I'm going to give you carte blanche to do it. If you need to buy agencies, buy companies, travel, that we like, go find the very best designers, and we'll do this. And which was kind of an exciting remit. And so I got together with the team and we made a list of who we thought were like I don't know how long the list, it was at least 50 people, like who we thought we really wanted to work with. And one by one, we put together a strategy. Who knew them? Why would they want to come work at Facebook? How could we get in touch with them? And one by one, and many of those designers ended up working with us. On that list was Daniel Burka and Jake Knapp and the GV team. And what's funny is they, no matter what we did, I mean, we joke, we like had dinners with Mark. We invited them to campus. We were like, you can work on whatever you want. They wouldn't come to Facebook. And so I just kept saying, like, what are these guys doing at this venture firm? Why won't they leave? And so I finally got some real time with them when I got over like being aggressive recruiter Kate, and just got to know them and just was like enamored with the job that they got to do. It was like they just spent their time with all these different companies helping enable design with these early founders, oftentimes introducing design to founders. And getting their hands dirty. It was kind of like running this consultancy where your base was already built in and your clients were there, and they had to deal with very little politics. Everyone was excited to see them when they came into the room. They didn't have to fight for the seat at the table. And so when I left Facebook, I took a break. I was at Wealthfront for a little while. I was really trying to think about what I wanted to do next. And I literally was like, I want to go to GV. And it just so happens Daniel called me and we started talking, and 6 months later, I was there, and that was 8 years ago. And it's been the best job of my career. I mean, I've loved it. I've loved really almost every moment of it.
That's amazing. And I didn't realize Daniel was the kind of the sort of the route in. So that's amazing. I
Yes,
love Daniel.
he
I've got
was.
a ton of
He
time for
very much
Daniel.
was. Yeah, yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, you've mentioned it already. Like GV has got a huge history of hiring amazing designers. You've talked about, we've talked about Jake and John and Daniel. Braden Cowitz was another one who I knew really well back in the day. And even in the UK, you've got Tom Holm, who was kind of coming from an amazing kind of background in IDEO. Like, what is it, do you think, that kind of GV sees in these designers that maybe other funds or other companies don't see?
That's a good question. When I think about design, it's less about the pixels and things like that. I think where I see it show up in the most meaningful way, if you're a founder, you have to be able to find a problem to solve, a real world problem to solve. And then you have to bring along a company, a venture fund, investors along on that journey and build empathy for the person that you're trying to solve that problem for. I regularly get on the calls with founders. If I would read their website 15 times, I couldn't tell you what they do. But I think as designers or designer investors, I think we have a unique talent of being able to really articulate the problem we're trying to solve in a very human way. How is this going to make someone's life better? How is this going to make a system better? How is it going to make the world better, society better? And tell those stories and bring people along. I think Tom has a really special talent for that. And I would like to think, I'm getting on a call next after we hang up, working with a very technical, super talented founder. He's just struggling with, how do I articulate this in a way that initially my customers will understand, and then, on top of that, more customers, and also the people I want to join my team.
I mean, I recognize a lot of what you've just described there. I mean, I think when I joined C-Camp, initially people thought I was a design guy and they'll roll me out if hey, we want someone to kind of review the product or hire a designer. But really quickly, I think what became evident is the skill I have, and I think most designers have, is a real ability to see things from beginner's mind, to see things from first principles, to really understand how someone that's never interacted with this product before could really see it. And so, like you, I find myself spending a lot more time talking about kind of positioning than I ever thought I would do, because it's the way that people describe what they do can often feel like a jumble, a word salad of kind of nonsensical kind of buzzwords, and people don't get it. And a lot of the time I spend actually in sales and marketing, because again, a lot of sales and marketing is asking the right questions. It's describing the product in a way that really lands. And I think a lot of people tend to have quite a sort of mechanical kind of super user, like they see things from their perspective. And I think designers are great at turning that lens around and going, okay, well, look, I understand what you're saying, but will the user, will the customer understand? And so I find that I'm doing a lot of that.
I think there's two things there too. Just designers, I think, tend to be curious. And honestly, we kind of use design as a Trojan horse into these companies, right? Like if you say, do you want product leadership help? The founder often is like, I'm the product leader. No, I don't need that. But if you say, hey, you want a designer to spend some time with you? Almost no one ever says no. And then we get permission to ask the really basic, what some might call, I hate when people say, I'm going to ask a dumb question. It's not a dumb question, but to ask those really basic questions that help us move along really, really well. So like people are like, do you want to be called a designer? Yeah, I run a team. I don't. Call me a designer. It's great because you know what? People usually aren't afraid of me when I come into a room and we can really get to the heart of the matter very quickly.
I mean, from my perspective, like I identify as a designer, but I actually haven't designed in anger for many, many years.
Same.
But I think you're right. People want to talk to someone that doesn't feel threatening. If it's like, hey, do you want to talk to our general partner? Do you want to talk to our kind of legal counsel? Do you want to talk to somebody else? It feels a bit threatening. Whereas there's something about kind of talking to a designer which actually feels quite exciting. And
Yeah.
also, what I find is like my relationship with a lot of my sort of portfolio sort of founders is that because of that, because we're talking about product related stuff, because we're an operator, there's almost kind of more of a camaraderie. Like, whereas when you talk to the investing partner, there's always a worry that what if I say the wrong thing? What if I kind of, if I let slip, the things aren't going as perfectly as my last update said. So I feel that I'm able to build a really, really familial, sort of friendly relationship with the people I work with that might not be possible if someone was coming in, with a briefcase and a Patagonia gilet.
Absolutely. No, I mean, our investors, they get to see the board version of the founder. I mean, uh, founders know this. When I work with them, I'm regularly sharing information back to the investor and I get to see different team dynamics. I can say, look, I've seen the head of product in the room with the designer. They don't get along. They're not listening. Here's where I think the founder's really strong where you haven't seen him yet or her. So it is fun to see kind of the inner workings of the teams where the investors don't necessarily see.
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely get to kind of meet a lot of the team, the heads of design, the heads of product, the other investors might not interact with. But also then I get a kind of an idea from both sides. I don't just have everything filtered through the founder. I get an idea of what the people on the coalface are actually feeling. But then to your other point, like I often find myself working with the founder to help them improve the storytelling of their board deck, even though that I'm also the consumer of the deck. Somehow they feel much more comfortable with me helping them craft that image, even though like there's a good chance that I might go back and have a conversation around like how things are going with the rest of the investment team. There's a feeling of being on their side, which I think is I love. And again, to the other point you mentioned, like as you know, like I've never worked in the tech space really. I've run a few small startups, but I come from the agency world. And you've mentioned like being in GV was a little bit like being an agency where people invite you in, they're really appreciative of your help. You come in and you consult and so for me that transition from agency into venture, it doesn't sound obvious, but it actually was an incredibly smooth experience. It was just kind of using those same skills.
Yeah, but the cool thing is that you're not looking for billable hours now.
Absolutely.
That's always I'm like, I'm a neutral party. Like all like literally, if your startup succeeds, I get carried. We are like I'm not looking for billable hours. I'm not trying to sell you a bigger package. Like we are all on the same team. And when you say that, I mean it's reality and it works, which is nice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm curious. So you obviously coming from a design background, like what is your sense of the level of kind of understanding and proficiency that the founders you interact with have around design?
I would say, starting from basics, I don't ever meet a founder now that's like, what's design? I don't think that this is important, which is amazing. I mean, I'm sure that they were like that at one point. I think that, I've been here for 8 years. founders are looking for design earlier and earlier and earlier. It used to be, consumer products were what looked good, and if that's what everybody thought of as, iPhone apps, right? That's what needed design. But it's the consumerification of enterprise software. Everybody is expecting a great experience, and frankly, raising money is almost the easy part now. And if you're not good at what you do and you're not solving a solution, somebody else in the market is going to take it from you. So I really enjoy those early conversations. And a lot of times it's like, hey, I had some experience. I built something. Will you take a look at it? Can you introduce me to a designer? Sometimes my favorite conversations are on the health tech side, where you get somebody who's been a physician and been in industry, in the medical side of things for years, and they have an idea, but they've never built a product before, and they think what we do is magic, whereas I'm looking at them and they're solving diseases and they're treating people, and I'm like, no, really, you're the person that has all the talent in the room. And they're like, no, I've never built a product before. I need you to help me get started. So people want to talk early about design, and it varies their experience. Some could be like, hey, my friend just helped me design this app. I don't think it's good. Can you do a tear down with me and let's get moving? Or it could be, look, I know design is going to be important to me in a year or two, but right now I just need to build a proof of concept, and I've got some engineers that are ready to test it, and we don't need to lean into it as hard.
That's really good to hear. I'm really glad to hear that you're feeling that founders are coming not necessarily needing convincing about design, but they're actually saying, hey, look, we need your help. One of the reasons we're probably interacting with you is because we knew you had these capabilities. Can you spend time with us? Your point around kind of health tech stuff, I think, is also really interesting. I think particularly physical devices, there are two elements. I mean, if you're in a healthcare situation, it can be quite intimidating. It'd be quite scary. And so having, somebody that can design tools that don't feel intimidating can be really useful. But also if you're a busy doctor, surgeon, or whatever, you want interfaces to be as simple and easy as possible. You don't want to be making mistakes. I mean, again, I'm a pilot, and the design of cockpit interfaces is fascinating because it's a high stress environment, and you want to make sure that everything is kind of easy to understand. The last thing you want to do is turn one button off when you went to turn the other one off, and so there's some great HCI stuff going on there.
No, I mean, if anything, with startups right now, I think it's a supply problem. If I could hire and find 10, 15 amazing founding designers like tomorrow, I would. I think we can get into this, but I think being the first designer at a startup is very much a unique talent that it's very hard to find a designer who can do that. I think it's hard. I think it's probably the hardest job in design, honestly. So, I was spending a lot of time trying to place early designers, writing the job descriptions, interviewing, sourcing, getting them placed, and then was seeing them kind of wash out in like 6 months. I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? And so lately I've been just working with a few really small agencies that are very good at working with founders, getting that proof of concept, getting them to market, and then trying to hire designers in.
I think a lot of VCs can sometimes feel reticent around investing in companies that don't have all of the talent in house. Are you seeing that actually there's an acceptance or a desire that you don't have to have a really strong design team, that you can actually outsource this at least as a stopgap while you're building that capability internally?
Yes, I absolutely do. I mean, I think if you're going to be a founding designer, so many things have to line up. One, you need to resonate with the problem they're trying to solve. You're going to spend a lot of time on this. Like if you don't believe in the product you're building, that's not going to work. Two, you've got to have real chemistry with the founder and be ready for that, to sign up for all of what that brings. And then three, you have to have the skill to do it. Like you're literally the only person there doing design, and the job is going to change radically from the first day to even 6 months later when you've got something. A lot of designers aren't up for that, and that's okay. Like I don't fault them for that. And so I actually think agencies that are really good at that early stage, I think are providing a tremendous amount of value.
Well, like I say, as a former agency person, that's sort of music to my former incantation ears. I'm curious, like, are there particular things that you find founders get wrong when they're hiring? Are they hiring too junior? Are they hiring too senior? Are they chasing after kind of the big logos? And then what are the designers that are being hired getting wrong about kind of what it takes to be a founding designer?
When I think about specifically about design, yes, I think that they get enamored with the big logos, which many times probably means that the designer they're hiring was just a part of a team of 10 working on the same product, or an organization of a few hundred. And they were probably very good at working within that system, but it was a system. They had a manager, they had PMs, they had Figma files that were there before they were there. And
They also probably had an actual design system that they were working on rather than to build designs from scratch. And they were
absolutely.
probably iterating on an existing problem rather than going 0 to 1.
Yes, yes. So that's tough. And also when you interview those designers, I used to be the person that would interview to see if they were startup ready. I have a whole list of questions I would ask. Many of them would get past it. It was like, can you think like an owner? Tell me about the last time, you really had influence over a product. What was the last time you started from scratch? All those kinds of things. And the designers convince themselves that they really want to be at a startup, and then they get there and they're like, "Oh, geez, I miss, I miss the structure."
I mean, I find this across the board with a lot of people. I see the same with heads like product people. I see the same with marketers. I see the same with salespeople. There's an allure, this idea of like, I've worked in big companies and I now want to do the startup thing. But what they don't realize is a lot of the stuff that made them successful in their previous, job was stuff that isn't going to exist anymore. If you're a salesperson, you maybe don't have a sales playbook. If you're a product manager, you don't have all of the tech stack and sort of roadmap that's already there. And a lot of people are used to kind of being in that environment where they're sort of supported and costed. So it can be a bit of an eye opener.
Yeah. So when I think about the designers in the portfolio, I've got like a few faces in my head that have lasted the longest and have really been effective being it's because they love the problem they're solving. They just geek out on it. I'm thinking of one woman who's like in DC who works on this deep security tech. She is like into it. I'm thinking about another one that's working on like AI shopping, and he is passionate about it. Like, and I think that sometimes when folks want to go to a startup, they think more about the role. Oh, I'm going to be the first. I'm going to have the power. I get to build the team. I get to be the head of design. Instead of like, no, it's you've got to be really excited and passionate about the problem you're trying to solve, because you're probably also going to wear many, many hats and work many long hours as well.
Curious, like what can founding designers do to work better with their founders? And again, what can founders do to make it easier or more successful role for a designer?
I think the most successful founding designers are pretty flexible. They meet the founder where they're at. The ones who get really, really frustrated are like, we should be doing user testing, all the time, or like, I need a system now, or I need to hire a team, or they're just, it's a constant trade-off, short-term wins, long-term view, short-term wins, long-term view, and you have to take that mindset as a designer when you're a company. Like, there are times when it just means you just have to buckle down and do exactly what the company is asking you for. And through that, you're going to learn something, and you're kind of going to earn the right to, when everyone pops their head up and says, what's the long-term view? You get to have a say in that. I think it's just being incredibly flexible, and that's easier said than done. I mean, I work with founders all the time. I would not be a good founding designer. So it's hard. It's really hard.
I think if you're somebody that wants to follow like the vaulted double diamond process, and you want to do loads of discovery and you want to do loads of prototyping, you want to come up with a bunch of different ideas, then maybe being an early stage sort of founding designer might not be the right fit. But I think it can be wonderful. A lot of founders have this vision in their head that they really struggle to articulate. And pairing them up with a really talented designer that can kind of pull that out, that can show it back to them and say, is this what you meant? Yes, no, and work through. I think that can be a wonderful partnership. But it can be frustrating at times because, again, you're helping deliver somebody else's vision. And I think a lot of designers want, and a lot of product managers even more so, want to see their own thumbprints on the thing. And so there is an element of being able to kind of, deliver what the founder wants before you then start kind of, gain their trust and then start inching things forward. And there is a lot of kind of putting things out there a little bit half baked, which is something that designers don't like to do.
No, no, they don't.
So I'm curious. So, like, YC recently, Y Combinator, very famous accelerator, put out a bit of a shout recently saying, we need more design founders. I'm just kind of wondering what your thoughts are on that. Is, do we have a lack of designers turned founders? Can you see a world where all of these amazing designers start their own products? Have you come across lots of design founders?
That's interesting. I have more of a contrarian. I don't know. I think certain people are cut out to be founders and others aren't. And if you happen to come from a design background, I think that's amazing. I mean, you and I have both seen, yesterday I was on with a woman who was pitching her startup, and I knew that we were probably the 8th or 9th call she had done yesterday, just repeating ad nauseum, like, this is what I do, this is my vision for the world. Sometimes she hops on, it's one investor. Yesterday there were like 6 of us kind of grilling her, and she showed up fresh-faced, like tons of energy. And we were like, what's your biggest enemy? And she's like, I just need to move fast enough. I mean, like, founders that are going to succeed, they're just cut from a different cloth. And so I wouldn't encourage a designer to go be a founder because we need more designer founders. I would say I would love to see more. I mean, I think if a designer these days has a burning desire to build something, I'd love to see them build it. I do think it's easier to get money these days. And I also think with AI, it is much easier to take what's in your head and make it reality. So I would love to see more designer founders, absolutely. And I also think, each founder brings their kind of own superpower. Rarely do founders appear from anywhere. Usually they were engineers in a past life or doctors or something like that, and they all bring their superpower. And as I was saying earlier, I think designer founders bring a certain articulation of their problem statement and kind of an idealism and a hope. I don't invest at work, but I angel invest a bit on the side. The few companies I'm thinking about are designer founders. And candidly, they're not companies that you would think a designer would. I think a lot of people think, oh, design is going to be consumer, it's going to be sexy. Like, this is tech that I would not have probably looked at, except the designer was so good at articulating what they were going to do and had a path for it and who their customer was, that I was like, okay, sign me up, I'll put a check in.
Yeah, there was a time when if you were designing and wanted to start your own business, everyone would start an agency because that's what they knew. I think what I see now is every designer I meet ends up, or not everyone, but a lot of them, their initial idea is either something to do with AI and research, some kind of a research repository or AI kind of assistant for running research, or it's a design tool. Everyone wants to kind of reinvent the new Figma. And I think there is a real lack of designers going, I'm actually going to lean into something that is outside of the design space, but where I can kind of solve, I can find a really underserviced kind of maybe even slightly boring sector and bring my expert product skills. And that's what we talk about, I think, when we're talking about design. We're talking about an understanding of users. We're talking about an understanding of what makes a great product experience and bring that to that sector. And so I love designers that come in and it's not just, hey, like, this is the sort of the 14th, research, repository tool that, I've seen this quarter. So, but I'm kind of curious, if you do come across kind of designers who are founders, are there things that kind of trip design founders up at all?
That's a good question. The few that I know, it's interesting now that you've just kind of laid it out there. I know some that have started design tools where they are the customer pretty much, and then designer founders where they're not necessarily the customer. They're building for someone else, and think in that niche category of the designers who are doing design tools, I think sometimes they get really, really swept up in what they think they're doing because it's for themselves and not enough understanding of maybe this isn't as useful or somebody else is going to do it better. I think.
Or just for me, it's often, I think it makes sense. A lot of the received wisdom is like, design for what you know, build for what you know. So I can understand why designers get attracted into seeing their own workflow and seeing what's broken and want to help. But one of the things I tend to find is actually the design space doesn't have a lot of budget, and it can be quite small. And so I meet a lot of people that start a design company and then end up having to pivot into servicing the marketing industry or the sales industry or some other industry, just because they've really struggled to kind of get traction. And so I think for me, like, knowing a space really well can often be a bit of an impediment, because
Yes.
you almost have this sort of like narrow thinking that kind of stops you from seeing the bigger picture.
I've also seen, I met with a designer founder this week that I'm invested in, and because it's not in the design space, he has very carefully constructed a group of people around him as advisors. Like, he very openly admits what he doesn't know and has people that are a bit contrarian in the room with him to really push him. And I think that makes him a much better founder. Whereas if you're a designer founder just working in the design space, sometimes there's probably feeling, I don't know that I need to put that many people around me. I know the space. And, I think the best founders also just know how to surround themselves with people that kind of like augment them in a way or question them in a way that really pushes their thinking and challenges them appropriately.
Another challenge I see, and it's not solely with design founders, but like a lot of the founders I meet, probably 70 to 80% of the founders I meet are product minded. They are builders. They are trying to deliver a vision that they've had for a while that they want to manifest in the world. And they might be engineers, they might be product managers, they might just be executives that have got a penchant for creating. But because of that, there's often a kind of a sense that if you build it, they will come. First of all, like, the idea is genius and people will come along. And when growth doesn't spark, they lean into the product more. They say, well, I'm gonna have to build my way out of this problem. I'm gonna have to add more features. I'm gonna have to do a better job of this and that and the other. And for me, I think one of the problems that designers have particularly, but these builders in general, is they don't lean into the other side of the equation, which is sales and marketing. Like, a lot of product people are actually quite comfortable being behind the screen, deep in the problem. And actually, I think a lot of the successful founders are actually the ones that are going out there, they are selling, they're marketing, and actually stepping away from the thing that they love and leaning into the thing that maybe makes them a bit uncomfortable. And so that's one of the things I see as a bit of a thing that designers need to get over, is they actually need to step away from the design and lean into the things that make you a great business person.
Absolutely. The best founders that are my favorite ones that I work with that are doing really well, they really become the head of sales early on, right? They're on all the customer calls, they're listening to all of them, and they've kind of handed over the product stuff to folks back home.
I couldn't let this conversation go without kind of exploring the role of AI. I'm sure, a lot of designers are kind of worrying about this. A lot of investors are investing in this. I'm just kind of curious, like, how are you seeing AI shape not just the world of design, but the world of startups more broadly?
Yes, it's in every conversation. It's hard to even, talk about what it's not in at this point. I mean, I think we're seeing a couple shifts, and I still think we're very, very early on. A lot of wrappers or AIification of this or that. Somebody at GV had the saying was like, when we were looking at some of these early AI tools, like, was it a horse that had some wheels strapped onto it, or was it truly a car, right? Like, was this something that needed AI? Was it being built from the inside out that truly needed it? So I think as a team, we've gotten better at kind of evaluating the space and asking the right questions in terms of investment. In terms of design, yeah, it certainly changed things, and I think it will be changing our roles. I think I'm an optimist. I think of AI being kind of magic at this point, in that if you can think of something, you can actually make it a reality. Like, it's so often people are creative or they have an idea, and it's the structure or the tools that hold them back from being able to actually express it. And I think it's really exciting now to see founders come in, and yeah, it might not be a final finished product, but you can actually, through using right now, they actually are able to express and show a pretty awesome prototype of what's happening. And also the same goes for designers. If a designer is like, oh my God, I have this idea, I can improve the product, or what if we did it like this? They can get that out really, really quickly. And I'm very, very excited about that. I think Yeah, career-wise, it's going to change everything. I mean, I advise and work very closely with the Savannah College of Art and Design, and a lot of students, like, we're looking at it in education and how will it affect jobs and career placement, and how are we teaching AI in design education. I'm involved deeply in the curriculum there where we're thinking about it. So we can't duck. I mean, I've got a son who's going to graduate from college next year who wants to be a lawyer, and we're looking at the legal profession. I mean, every profession, I think, is being hit by it right now. But I'm an optimist. I think, we're going through some interesting, growth spurts right now that are challenging. But I think things at the other side, I think I'm optimistic that they'll shake out well.
I think weirdly, you sort of have to be an optimist if you're in the VC world, because you're optimistic about the future. You're planting lots of bets, and the optimism is that one or two or three or more of them will kind of grow into something amazing. You're obviously optimistic that the future will be better than the now, and you want to actually put your money where your mouth is to help build that better future. And so I think VCs tend to be sort of optimistic by nature. I guess from my perspective, like, one of the things I'm finding really interesting is, I think a lot of, going back to the kind of designers becoming founders, I think designers struggled previously without having an amazing technical co-founder. And I think now designers can get a lot further in terms of proof of concept without having having to kind of build up that network. I think it's still important to kind of raise funding, but I think designers now have the capability to kind of start exploring ideas, and not only designers, actual non-design founders, product managers, etc. So I think it's blowing the space open. So I think we're going to see more and more volume of stuff coming in, maybe at earlier stage, and maybe at kind of lower valuations or lower amounts of investment, because when maybe you needed a 5-person team to get something off the ground, like, maybe now you just need one person and maybe not lovable, but a similar type kind of prototyping tool. So I think it's having really interesting effects there. I also think in terms of founders, I think, I when I came into VC, I was really ready to be going into founders saying, hey, look, the first hire needs to be a designer. They'll help you shape the product. They're so critical. And I've realized that actually I see so many founders that have built amazing products that are really quite consumer grade without needing to have a designer. Like, they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but 2 or 3 years ago, they'd be using a design system, a kind of a bootstrap kind of, and the product was looking really good. These days, I often find that what is really useful is having a designer for 6 weeks to kind of noodle around with ideas. But then that can probably produce 3 or 4 months worth of engineering kind of backlog that then you can go and just get the engineering team building. So, and I think AI will accelerate that even more. I think designers will be more. I was listening to a podcast today about kind of script doctors, Hollywood script doctors. They get given a script and their job is to come and then tweak it and improve it. And I actually think designers are going to be more like script doctors. They're not going to be designing 0 to 1, but a founder will say, hey, look, we've been up and running for 6 months, 9 months. We've got a really good product, but we need you to come in and help us kind of make it better. Like, we know it's not quite landing. We know that the onboarding isn't quite as effective as it could be. We know that the value is maybe a little bit hidden. Like, we don't want you to do the 0 to 1 now, but we want you to almost kind of act as a growth designer. And so I think there's huge opportunities for design.
Absolutely. I mean, it reminds me, the last week I was talking to a founder who was ready to hire his first designer, and he's like, I think I want a design systems person, which I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. That's what he was thinking about. And I'm like, someone could take that and make it feel very tactical, but I see it as a strategic role, actually. If they're thinking, it's not just about the pixels and the icons. It's like, he's recognizing that he can get design going pretty quickly, but he needs someone from a UX perspective to kind of oversee all of that and how it's implemented. So it's fun to see the early designers become now design system people, or people were looking for brand people earlier and earlier, which is kind of fun. Like, I feel like brand kind of went out of fashion for a little while in terms of, like, to your point, build it, they will come, the product designer can do the brand. But now it's like, oh, we've got this amazing thing, but we don't know how to talk about it and position it and really package it. And so I'm passing more work onto brand strategists and brand designers than I have in a couple years. And it's a lot of fun, actually. It's been good.
Awesome. Well, last 2 really quick fire questions. Outside of work, what's bringing you joy at the moment?
What's bringing me joy at the moment? That's a good question. My dog, George, and visiting my son at college in Miami. And he's going to Europe next year, and I'm excited to go visit him.
Amazing, amazing. And I was really lucky to be, I don't have a dog myself, but I was dog sitting a little feisty cockapoo over the summer for like 3 or 4 weeks, and it was absolutely fun. So I think we're kind of getting close to kind of also being kind of dog parents at some stage.
Yeah, they bring a certain benevolence to your household where they just like, get a golden retriever. That's what you've got.
And then sort of finally, like, where can people kind of follow you? Where can they hear more about you, your work, GV, and what you're planning on doing next?
I would say LinkedIn. I'm really kind of terrible at posting socially. I need to do better about it, but probably LinkedIn. I love to post about jobs where I think that the designers can really make a difference, and occasionally we'll post some thoughts on things.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you.
Oh, it was so fun. So good to catch up.
Brilliant. And thanks to all of you who are listening to the Design VC. If you enjoyed this episode, please do share it with any founders or designers who you think might find it valuable. And until next time, I've been Andy Budd, and this has been the Design VC.